Alright, in this video we'll get into the cost side of things and introduce a few terms, how to calculate different types of costs, and this will be useful in a lot of the questions and solutions that you'll have for your assignments this week. So we're going to introduce first of all fixed cost and variable cost and total cost. We should know what fixed resources are and variable resources, and the costs then associated with those are what we call fixed and variable cost. So a fixed cost is any cost that is independent of a firm's rate of output. So this means that this cost is going to be the same if they produce 1 unit, if they produce 100 units or 1,000 units, or if they shut down and produce 0 units. That fixed cost is still going to remain the same. With COVID-19, a lot of bars and restaurants have had to shut down, and they are not, maybe ordering food or ordering beverages that they would normally order. They don't have to pay those costs, but they do have to pay some costs even though they are not operating. If they have to pay rent on their building, property tax, these are costs that are going to be fixed, that are not going to change regardless of how much production is happening. A variable cost are going to be costs that change as production change. So the more of a good or service that you produce, the more inputs that are needed to produce those, the more your variable costs are going to change. So these variable costs will change as your output changes. And then your total, we just figure out by adding our fixed and our variable cost. And TC, FC, and VC are the symbols that we use for those. Marginal cost is where we spend a lot of time with. So here we're looking at the cost of producing 1 additional unit of a good or service. So marginal cost, the formula is a triangle, so that's change. So our change in total cost divided by our change in Q, or our change in quantity, which is a change in the output. Okay, so change in total cost divided by a change in the output. This is what we call or recognize as marginal cost. So these changes in marginal cost are a reflection of our marginal return. Last video we talked about increasing marginal returns. Remember, as we added more workers, they became more productive. In the example, the first worker added 2 tons of moving capacity, and then the second worker brought along another 3 tons of moving capacity, so we saw increasing marginal returns. While we're experiencing that, marginal costs are falling, and I'll show you here what this marginal cost curve, once we graph it, looks like. It looks like a U under all situations because of the law of diminishing marginal return. Right? As we are increasing our marginal returns, our marginal costs are falling. And at some point, right, we know that we're going to see diminishing marginal returns set in, and then our marginal costs will start to increase, and we'll start having that up slope. So marginal costs, and I know you can't see it here, but as we see increasing marginal returns are falling, and then as we see diminishing marginal returns, marginal costs start to move in the opposite direction, start moving up again. So a lot of your problems are going to look like this, where we're figuring total costs, or you're going to have to calculate marginal costs, or you're going to have to kind of fill in some of the blanks. So a couple things to look at with this is, you see our fixed costs don't change. Regardless of output, we got to pay $200 per, looks like per day, maybe, per month, I don't know. But that 200 does not change. So here we've got 0 output because we have 0 workers employed, but we still have 200 in fixed costs. Our total costs are, remember, fixed plus variable gives us a total cost of 200. When we employ that first labor of unit of labor, so here's our first worker, and this is from that previous example in the previous video of the book, we get 2 units of output. Our marginal return, right, is 2. What is our marginal cost? So what did we get, right, from adding this unit of labor? So we're going to figure out the marginal cost of this output. So how we do that, if you remember, right? Change in total cost divided by the change in output. So you can see over here, we went from 200 to 300. So our variable costs were 100. It cost us $100 to employ this one worker for the day. So we went from 200 to 300. So our change in total cost was, right, 2 to 3, that was our change in total cost was 100. And we're going to divide that by a change in the quantity. And our change in quantity went from 0 to 2, so it's 2. So we take 100, change in total cost, divided by our change in quantity of 2, gives us a marginal cost of 50. So each unit of output, the marginal cost of each unit there was $50. And we can go on and do that. So here we go. We add another worker and we're paying them the same. You can see that, right? Because our variable costs now are another 100, so a total of 200. Fixed are 200 still, so that gives us a total cost of 4. So we look at our change in total cost is another 100 for the extra worker. But now, okay, it becomes cheaper because we're getting more output from that worker. So our output, it was 3. So we take our change in total cost, which was 100, and divide it by our change in our quantity, which was 3 this time. So now our marginal cost per unit is only $33. And you can see on this down the line, we see increasing marginal returns here. We're getting more for each unit of labor that we employ, and we see our marginal costs are falling. So here's our change in our total cost. We add another unit of labor, costs us another $100. So our change in total cost is 100, divided by our change in output, which is now 4, going from 5 to 9. So now that unit of labor, that $100, right, our marginal costs now fall to $25. So we can see as we are experiencing increasing marginal returns, we have decreasing marginal costs. When we start to experience diminishing marginal returns, we start seeing increasing marginal costs. So I talked about, I'll skip ahead here a little bit, this marginal cost curve is always going to be a U-shaped curve because as we are experiencing, you can tell right away just from the shape of it, here we have increasing marginal returns of labor. So here's increasing marginal returns, diminishing marginal cost. We hit a point where marginal return starts to diminish, okay, and then that we see increasing marginal costs. Back. So that U curve, right, it started at 50 and it's going down, it's going down, it's going up, starting to go back up, going back up, and getting even steeper as it gets higher. So that's kind of the graphic representation there of what you're seeing in numbers. Let's see what else we want to talk about in costs. The average costs are kind of important to understand. So you've got average variable, average fixed, and average total. We understand variable, fixed, and total costs now, or at least we should. To figure out the average, we just take at that level whatever our variable costs are and divide it by the quantity. That will give us the average. So anytime we want to figure out average, whether it's variable, whether it's fixed, whether it's total, you just take that cost, okay, the fixed divided by the quantity, the variable divided by the quantity, and that gives us the average. Okay. And we'll get into averages a little bit more in some of our assignments here. Kind of talked about that. I think that's good for this video. I think that will help us get through more. More on total costs and variable cost curves. Your fixed cost, again, remember, it's never going to change. It's always going to be a flat line at whatever the fixed are. Your total cost will always start, total cost curve will always start at the point where the fixed costs are, because your total cost will always be at the same origin, or same spot, originate from the same spot as your fixed costs do. Your variable costs will always start at 0 at the origin, and they will kind of increase at similar slopes and approach each other. They'll never ever hit each other. But you'll notice this difference between this gap between the two, and that gap or that difference is going to be right between our variable and total. It's always going to be the value of what our fixed cost is. So if you're going between this spot and this spot, right, we're always looking at our fixed cost. I don't know if we'll get into the shape of curves a ton, but maybe a little bit as we get into our assignments. But all right, good luck.